Hi, everybody. Thanks, and thanks for finishing your lunch in time for being here. I really appreciate it. I am going to talk about another much loved, I assume it's loved, subject, stakeholders. We all love them, right? It's stakeholder management is, I call it the hardest skill that nobody teaches you, right? We learn about how to make roadmaps. We learn about how to do discovery. We learn about how to prioritize things. We learn how to work with engineers sometimes. But then there's all of the rest of the organization, and how do we make that work? I think it's the magic behind the science of product management, stakeholder management. And I think maybe it's the difference between someone who is a good individual contributor and someone who is a leader, someone who can get their product to that next level and get their career to that next level. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. First, just a little bit about me. There's supposed to be some items here about my bio, but suffice it to say, it's actually a really long list of things that I have done, jobs that I have done. I've been a product manager. I've been an engineering manager. I've been a designer. I've been a business development person. I've been a tester. I've been a marketer and a salesperson. You name it. I have done it, or I've been in charge of it, officially or unofficially. And it's given me some empathy for stakeholders because I've been in those roles, which is good. And it's also helped me to understand how it all comes together. And a lot of that came together into this book, Product Roadmaps Relaunched, that I and these other gentlemen wrote a few years ago on how to get everybody on the same page with a roadmap. And there's a whole chapter on stakeholder management, but I have to tell you that only scratched the surface of what you really need to do. I did a workshop on roadmaps with one student, and when we started talking about how to sell the process that we had worked through in the workshop to the rest of the organization, they said, oh, this is the workshop we need. How to sell a product way of thinking and operating throughout the organization. I work with companies now all over the world, big and small, in lots of different industries on this stuff. But I want to go back in time to a time when I didn't know so much about product. I didn't know how to make it work. And I want to talk about my first product management product launch and how it was doomed from the very start. I had what I thought was a brilliant idea. In the dim days before the internet bubble, there were some internet products. I had one of them. It was called Letter Builder. And Letter Builder was the first, as far as I know, online place where you could upload a list of people you wanted to send a mailing piece to, get it printed and personalized to those people, and then shipped out on demand. And you could get it done in 24 hours just by putting in a credit card. It was the first online print and mail letter shop in the world on the web. I was convinced it was going to revolutionize my company, and we were going to revolutionize the marketing through the internet, and we were going to go IPO. It was going to be awesome. Why did it fail? Well, you can see that it failed here. Letterbuilder.com, the domain is still for sale many years later. Obviously, it didn't go anywhere. Why did it fail? Well, let me tell you what happened about 2 weeks before launch. About 2 weeks before launch, I was all excited about the product being ready to go, and I walked down the hall to the VP of Marketing's office. And I was there to talk to her about what we were going to do for marketing campaigns for my new product. And before I could ask that question, she asked me that question. She said, "What are you doing to market this thing, Bruce?" And I said, well, I thought that was your job. And it turned out that, yes, marketing was her job, but that her entire budget and her entire plan and her entire team for the year were dedicated and committed already to our core product. Mine was the second product, and she had no plans, no intentions, no desire to promote it. She thought it was a great idea, but she wasn't going anywhere with it. So I stumbled out of that meeting to a meeting with the head of sales, which went very much the same. The comp plan was set for the year, the projections were set for the year, everything was set and locked, and there was really no changing it. So I really didn't know what to do, and unfortunately, it was at that time of the day that the president of the company was planning to take me to lunch to celebrate the launch of my product. So the first question he asked me was, "So, Bruce, what are your expectations for the launch?" It was a very quiet lunch. So I want to share with you what I learned on that day and through that process. I learned that I had completely forgotten about marketing, sales, support, finance, services, everything other than just building the product. It had product market fit. I knew that because I had gotten customers excited about it, and I had gotten some test customers to use it, but it didn't have product organization fit. It didn't fit within our plan, even though we had a strategic plan, ideally, to expand into new product areas. We had no plan on how to execute it. My friend Clément says, a good decision with bad understanding from your stakeholders won't get you the results you need. And that's, I think, the summary right there. You can't do it alone. And you can't do it with just you and a couple of engineers and a designer, which is what I tried to do. The fundamental insight I had from that moment and that I took forward throughout the rest of my career as a product person was to treat my stakeholders as though they were a type of customer. Think about all we've been taught and have learned how to practice with dealing with customers. We have learned to be empathetic. We have learned to do discovery interviews. We have learned to figure out what their goals are and to take all of that into consideration before designing a solution. And we have learned to validate those solutions with them before we build them or try to launch them. I skipped all of that. And I don't want you to skip that. I want you to think, all right, I have the customers outside the building and I have the customers inside the building, and I need a solution that works for them both, or we're going nowhere. And I've come up with a few tips that I want to pass on for how to do that. A little bit of a structure, a little bit of a scaffold for launching your stakeholder management effort for your product. It has these 5 elements. First, you would need to identify them, prioritize them, understand them, and then lead them where you want them to go. Let's talk about them one at a time. Identifying them is the first most important thing, and it's not as obvious as it might seem. Think about your org chart. Does your real-life org chart, I found this on the internet, it's awesome. Does your real-life org chart actually tell the story of who is important and who you need to talk to? Is the CEO actually the most critical person in all cases? I know companies where it's actually the CFO is the most important person, or the head of sales, or the CTO. And you're all reading the slide. It's great, isn't it? And you need to take into account not who reports to who. Yeah, that matters. But who has a relationship with who else, and who that actually doesn't have very many people reporting to them, maybe nobody, but is really cushy, really close with the founder, is an influencer that you need to influence yourself if you want to succeed. So I find the org chart is really not helpful. You need to throw away the old org chart, and you need to make your own chart of your organization's stakeholders. I'd like to give you a little bit of guidance on that. Some of you may have seen a chart like this before, mapping influence against interest. Influence within the organization versus interest in your product or your project or your campaign or whatever that it is that you're managing. This is a classic in stakeholder mapping. I've taken it a step further to try to give some description to all the quadrants of this chart. The first, in what I call the TIPS framework, is your team. These are your most important stakeholders. They're going to execute on your vision, your mission, whatever it is that you're trying to lead. And if they're not bought in, absolutely nothing is going to happen. So you need, first of all, to consider them. But then, although these people have a lot of influence on the success of your product and a lot of interest because they're on the team, there are what I call power players. These people in the organization are people who may not have a lot of interest in your product, but they do have a lot of influence in the organization. Think of people who, if you don't have their support, they can kill your product or your project entirely with a word in the CEO's ear or at an executive team meeting. I see somebody smiling over there. He probably knows someone exactly like this. These are the people who you need to get to early. Then also think about people who may not have a lot of influence, but who will be impacted by the changes that you're introducing. If you're launching a new product or a new feature or just a new version of your product, the customer support team may not have a lot of influence or power within your organization, but they are going to get all the calls from the first-time users who are confused about your new thing, so they need to be part of your stakeholder management. They need to know what's coming and when it's coming, or they're going to be very upset with you. And then the last category is what I call subject experts, or sometimes SMEs, subject matter experts. These are people who may not be interested in your product, may not have a lot of influence within the organization, but have specialized knowledge that you may need. Think like the legal department who's going to give you the disclaimer or the click to agree for your application. Think about the HR department or the security team or the regulatory team. These people have very specific knowledge that if you don't consult them early, you could run into trouble later. And occasionally, subject experts in some organizations can rise to be power players. In Oracle, the lawyers rule. I know, I worked for Oracle for a little while. And if you don't check the box with the lawyers, your project is going nowhere. So this is the TIPS framework, team, impacted, power players, and subject experts. This is the simplest stakeholder map that you can make. Now, you may be reflecting that when I said you should map out all these different kinds of stakeholders that I pretty much named everybody. And that's true. Everybody, potentially, within your organization is a stakeholder. Even better, none of them work for you. So stakeholder management, stakeholder influence is critical to your success if you want to get anywhere. They have to do what you ask or do things that support your product, not because you told them to, but because you've convinced them it's the right thing to do. And it's more important than whatever else was on the top of their list this week, right? So it's a job to do, and it's not a simple one. And if there are all of these stakeholders, how are you supposed to prioritize? You cannot spend all of your time meeting with stakeholders all the time. When are you going to meet with actual customers? When are you going to work with your team on getting something done? So you've got to shrink down the list to the critical people that you really must influence. So let's talk about how to do that. And I'm going to give you a little poll I want you to do right now. You can go to slido.com and put in this hashtag, or you can use this QR code. And it's just a one-question poll. Who are the power players in your organization? Not by name, but by department. So there's sales and engineering and all the rest of the departments. Give me your answer, and let's see what you all come up with. They should be playing Jeopardy music right now, right? Oh, they're playing some music. Excellent. All right. Have we got a few answers? Have a few people had a chance to answer the question? Not yet? The network is slow, I know. The network is slow for you? Yeah. Let's see if we have any answers. Can we go to the poll results? No. Oh, there we go. Okay. Poll results say founders, 36%, then sales, then product management, then engineering, then services, then finance. I'm going to give you all credit. I'm going to give you all credit for being more honest than American audiences. When I give this poll to American audiences, they always put product at the top. And I always tell them that they are fooling themselves. Because unless they're doing a fantastic job, a much better job than I think they are at stakeholder management, in fact, it often looks a lot like that original chart, with either founders at the top or sales or sometimes engineering at the top. I want to tell you a story about how I discovered who the real power players were and how I discovered I did not work in a product-led organization. So I worked for an enterprise software company years ago, and I thought it was product-driven, or maybe I had a suspicion it could possibly be engineering-driven. We had a good-sized product team for the day, 12 product people, and we had 200 engineers. So our ratio was not perfect, but this was some time ago. And I thought, okay, so we're at least tech-driven. Whether it's product or engineering, it's one of those or the other. And I knew that I had good relationships all around the organization. I worked very closely with my own team. We had a fantastic supportive relationship. I worked closely with the other teams that we had mutual dependencies on within our larger technology organization. And I also started building relationships with customers, with marketing and professional services, with finance, with vendors and partners, the whole ecosystem. But it wasn't until I started working more hand and glove with sales and started assisting them with their job of closing business or making customers happy enough to renew that I got promoted. I didn't get noticed enough at the corporate level to be promoted until I helped sales. And that was an interesting lesson for me. I started to question whether the company was actually product or even engineering led. And I asked myself a few other questions that I propose you ask yourselves. What department did your CEO come from before they were CEO? If they were CEO even at another company, what discipline? Marketing, sales, engineering? Think about that. Maybe they still have some loyalty to that function unconsciously within your organization. Which department within your company has the easiest time justifying new hires even in a downturn? That is a clue as to who is leading. Which department asks the most challenging questions in a roadmap presentation? When are you going to have this? When are you going to have that? What's going on with this other thing? Which department gives rewards and recognition to people from other departments for helping them? This was a clue for me at this company. There was a sales awards dinner every year. Maybe you've had these at your organization. And they would usually pick one product person to recognize for helping, and it was always because you helped me close this deal or save this customer or something like that, and you'd get a bonus and a plaque. That was a clue. Which departments have a chief something rather than a VP of something? This was the ultimate clue for me. Who does the CEO get together casually with for coffee in the morning or for lunch on a regular basis? At this company, it was the sales operations guy, the one who knew exactly the status of every deal in process right now, including renewals. And the CEO had coffee with him every single morning. So what do I conclude after all of this? The company was sales-led, and that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, that worked out well. We sold the company. But it was sobering for me when it was a shift of mind for me to recognize that I wasn't in the organization that I thought I was. So prioritize according to who is really the power players within the organization. Then, supposing you've identified these people and prioritized them, and you're going to spend a little bit of time with them, how do you come to understand them better? better. Right? Remember, we're treating them like customers. What do we need to do with customers in order to have a successful product? We need to understand them. We need to empathize with them. One tip I would give you, especially in today's remote optional, remote forward, remote first, remote second, hybrid, whatever you want to call it, workplace, is think hard about the means of communication that you use with your stakeholders. Don't send out a mass email, or even worse, a tweet, to everybody in the company and figure, well, that's stakeholder management, right? I've told everybody what we're doing. That's not very intimate, meaning one-on-one. It's not personalized. It's not me and you, right? It's me broadcasting to the entire conference. And it's also very low bandwidth. What do I mean by bandwidth? I mean, anything written in text is missing a lot that you get face-to-face. It's missing tone of voice. It's missing intonation. It's missing body language. It's missing probably the majority of the message. It is not contained in the actual typed-out words. Even worse, it's asynchronous. It's really asynchronous because sometimes people don't read emails for days or even weeks, never mind respond to them. So if you were unclear about something in the email, then the question, the clarifying question that would help them understand everything that you wrote after that point in the email may not get answered for days or weeks. Have you ever seen a comment thread in Jira on a particular ticket that has been running for months with comments and questions and answers with weeks in between them? That's just doomed to go on forever, and it's the same with most email threads. So the communications medium that has the highest intimacy, one-on-one, and the highest bandwidth, face-to-face, and the highest synchronization, live, is face-to-face, one-on-one, face-to-face. If you want to really get to know a stakeholder well, there's no substitute for that. And I know lots of us work from home, I do, but I make it a point to get on a plane and come to Paris and meet people in person sometimes to establish the relationship, to understand, to get to the basic understanding, and then it makes emails more possible in the future. I work with this one company where they have a VP of product who joined to work with their CPO, who is a founder, and their CPO promptly moved from London to New Zealand, which is 13 hours away, almost the opposite side of the planet. And so they had no overlap in their regularly scheduled work days. And so their mode of working together was to write each other elaborate emails once a week, really trying to be unambiguous and detailed and thorough. And the amount of energy that was wasted in that was incredible. When the CPO from New Zealand came to visit London, they cleared up weeks' worth of misunderstandings over coffee. Once. That's all it took. And I think that's important to recognize. So you can fall back from face-to-face as you have to. If you can't do face-to-face, try to do video. That's at least live and one-to-one. If you can't do video, try to do a voice call. If you can't do a voice call, try to do text, but do it synchronously. Do it on Slack, do it on WhatsApp, so that question and answer can happen in real time. Fall back only as far as you have to from that. And then I want you to, once you've gotten together with a stakeholder, I want you to think about their motives. They're not necessarily going to come out and tell you what's on their mind and what's important to them. Most people are either afraid to tell you because they think it'll make them look bad or because they think it'll make you look bad, and they don't want to do either of those. So you have to infer. You have to logically think, if I were this person, what would my motives be? Or you can infer them from their actions, from their past actions, like a black hole. You can infer them. The black hole is invisible. Astronomers cannot see them, but they can see the gravitational effect on things around them. So watch for that. You can you can expect certain concerns from anyone in a particular job. You can expect when you show the roadmap to a salesperson that they will have certain concerns like, how will this help me close business? Can I sell this stuff that's later in the roadmap now? What are we doing about the competition? And, oh, I have 5 special requests I would like to add to the roadmap for particular customers, right? We all know, you know, that these are the things that are going to be on their minds. So get out ahead of that. Start the conversation knowing that some of these things are, even if they don't say them in the back of their mind. Same with engineering. Anything you show them on a roadmap, they're thinking, do you know how much work this is? We can't possibly get this done this year. And what about tech debt? And I would never use any of these things. Why would customers? And of course, will you change your priorities tomorrow is also on their minds. And then finance. Finance wants to know, where's the ROI, right? Can we increase margin? Can we reduce costs? All of these things are on their minds, whether they say so or not. So start with that in mind. Start with what you know, and maybe throw out a statement like, I'll bet you're concerned about, or if I were you, I would probably be worried about. And then give them the chance to say, well, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, I'm glad we're having a frank conversation. Yes, tech debt is a real concern. I think that we're running into some risks that we need to manage. And now you know, you validated that with them, and you can use that that understanding and that empathy that you've just generated between the two of you to move forward. Or maybe they will surprise you and say, actually, no, I think we're in good shape on that. We've been really taking care of a lot of that stuff, and we have a discipline about it. Don't worry about it. I'll let you know if we run into trouble. Great, it's off the table, and now you can move on. But get that stuff out explicitly if you possibly can. Treat them like a customer from there and listen. Do more listening than talking, just like you would in a customer interview. Don't tell them about your thing, ask them about their thing. And eventually they know why you're there. Eventually they will get around to telling you what you need to know. But in the meantime, I want to give you a few tips and techniques for active listening. And most of these work on Zoom as well as in person. First, instead of talking, encourage them to talk by mirroring. What do I mean by mirroring? I mean by mirroring what they're doing yourself, reflecting back what you are seeing and hearing from them so that you are acknowledging them and so that you feel comfortable to them because you look and act like they do. People are naturally comfortable with people who seem similar to them. They can assume that if you're similar to them, that you're a good person because they assume they're a good person, whether that's true or not. So first of all, you can imitate their posture. If they are very dominant and aggressive, you can do the same thing. If they're chill and leaning back, or if they're like leaning back on their desks like this, you can actually imitate their posture, and it helps them feel comfortable. I remember the first time I ran through these slides, I put my laptop on a table, and I presented them to my wife, and I realized when I got to this slide that the two of us were sitting exactly the same, and that I was doing it unconsciously before I even got to the slide to remind me to do it. It just happens naturally, but you can do it on purpose to make other people feel comfortable. Second, fronting. Fronting is when, instead of facing somebody like this, like, yeah, I'm busy, what is it? You actually square your shoulders directly toward them so that you're facing in the same direction, you're looking right at them. And that helps them feel like you are paying attention to them, like you are really interested, and encourages them to share more. Similarly, eye contact. Now, this actually varies from culture to culture. Some cultures are not that comfortable with a lot of direct eye contact. It's not a yes or no thing, it's a how much, what percentage of eye contact do you make. Americans kind of like, most of us, kind of like a larger amount of eye contact. I've noticed the Brits are kind of a little shy of a lot of direct eye contact. Somebody in the Q&A will have to tell me your opinion about the French and eye contact. I haven't developed an opinion yet. But I think you may be a little more direct than the English. That's my gut instinct. Also, there is leaning in. And you can really do this on Zoom, very literally, like, oh, tell me more. I really want to know. Leaning in really does, you're sitting in a chair and you're like, uh-huh, oh, okay. You're really transmitting that you are listening and you want to know more. And then there is my favorite. This is called the triple nod. This is when someone says something and you go, oh, yeah, okay, right, yeah. And you don't have to make those sounds. In fact, if you're on Zoom, I encourage you not to bother with the don't make any sounds. Don't make any mm-hms or anything, because the duplex, it interrupts them just a little bit, and they may be thinking you're trying to say something, and it slows them down, and you don't want to do that. You want them to talk, so just give them the triple nod. It's really super effective. And you're not actually saying, I agree. You're just acknowledging, I heard you, I get it. You can come back around and have a debate later, but start by acknowledging what they're saying. There's also punctuation gestures. You may have noticed I talk with my hands a lot, and a lot of people do. And it's good form to let yourself be free about those punctuation gestures, because it transmits those things that are missing in an email, right? It's also useful to imitate other people's gestures. If they have a really weird one, don't imitate that. And there are certain gestures I'm sure you don't want to do. But you do want to transmit that you get what they're saying and that you're on the same wavelength. So if they emphasize by putting their hands out, both hands out like this, do it like that. If they go like this, do it like that. And then my favorite thing is, if you figured out what punctuation gesture they like, and they make a particularly strong point, you can make that gesture silently without saying anything. They say, and I really think that, and you just go, right? You're just like, that's right, without saying anything, without interrupting them. And as long as you're not talking, they usually feel the need to fill the space. So you'll get more information that way by mirroring with them using body language rather than by talking. On the other hand, when you do talk, you can take advantage of mirroring with word choice. If they have favorite buzzwords like AI or awesomeness or whatever, then use those same buzzwords, and they'll feel like you're on the same wavelength. And similarly, some people talk really fast and they get up into a high register and they're just really excited and you want to meet them there. And other people are very, very chill and low-key, and you should be chill and low-key as well. You can be very dry and academic and deliberate in your delivery. Whatever their style is, if they perceive you as similar, then they will implicitly trust you. And it's much easier to have a conversation once you've established that level of comfort and trust. So supposing you've got all this figured out, you've mapped out your stakeholders, you've prioritized them, you've spent a bunch of time with them, you've got rapport with them and trust with them, you've got a lot of information together. What do you do now? Okay, now is the time for me to push my agenda, right? Well, sort of. I still think it's a process of leadership, not control. Leadership, in my mind, is embodied here on this slide. Bain and Company did a study some years ago where they mapped out the decision-making styles of different organizations. Some, they found, were very top-down, very directive. One charismatic founder or a few executives basically say, this is what's happening, get comfortable with it. And everyone is expected to follow. And in some organizations, though, it's very bottoms-up. It's very democratic. There's actually voting sometimes within some organizations. I don't know these organizations, but I'm told they exist maybe somewhere in Scandinavia. And then there's lots of our organizations, though, whether we acknowledge it openly or not, operate kind of by consensus. Nothing really happens until pretty much everybody is on board and nodding their heads. And that's the kind of the slowest way to get anything done, in my mind. It's just hard to get everybody on board. If you've ever had the experience of trying to get everyone to agree where to go to dinner, you know what I'm talking about. But my favorite kind, and Bain's favorite kind too, is called the participative method. This is a kind of a hybrid of bottoms up and top down. This is where one person actually does own making the decision, but they are obligated to seek input from the stakeholders, from people who have necessary information and expertise, from people who will be impacted, from people who are influential, all the people in the TIPS framework. It's your job to get their input before you make a decision, not just tell them what the decision is. And that way you're going to be able to make a better decision, and from a stakeholder point of view, a decision that is more likely to be bought into by the stakeholders who were consulted all through the process and actually be successful. Because they're going to execute it, because they were part of it. They were part of the decision, so yay, let's go forward. That's the method I recommend. And I think it's important to realize that stakeholder management is a leadership function. It is not handling requests. It is not getting approvals. It is not handling objections to your plan. It is much more proactive rather than reactive to demands from stakeholders. I think my favorite definition is that stakeholder management is leading a group of people to do something amazing, something awesome and great that you're all going to be proud of doing together. It's really team leadership. I think of the stakeholders as your greater team. And this is my favorite quote ever. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus." So it's an active, proactive leadership role. It does involve persuasion. It does maybe involve negotiation. But if you do all the things that we've talked about in managing your stakeholders, in identifying them, prioritizing them, getting to know them, understanding them, then leading them becomes natural at that point. It's not a heavy lift. I want to talk about a term. Who's heard of the DRI? Anybody? Few people over here. The DRI is a term invented at Apple. It's called the what? Directly responsible individual. That's right. And so at Apple, the quote is, when someone is trying to learn who to talk to on a project, they're asking about the DRI. And GitLab has adopted this same role. It's every project is assigned a DRI, and they're responsible for making this thing successful. They don't do all the work. They don't issue orders. It's a cross-functional leadership role. Sounds a lot like product, right? So it's really effectively a product management sort of role that's responsible for the success or failure of a project. So what does the DRI do? The DRI aligns with people in charge, the power players, on what the objectives are for the project. They align with stakeholders on metrics and priorities, requirements. They do all of the shuttling around to the stakeholders to get the necessary input. They review all available data about the customers, about the market, about the product. They seek the best advice from the experts. They communicate those decisions back through the entire organization with the reasons why, once they've made them through this consultative process, and they communicate progress broadly and regularly throughout the organization. Sound familiar? It should sound like a product manager's job. It's very useful in situations where there are cross-functional teams, where there are complex decisions or projects, or where you're wanting to delegate decision-making to someone close to the customer and the data. Again, product. So let's suppose you did all of this brilliantly. What sort of result might you expect? Hopefully you would not make the mistake that I made with Letter Builder. Let me tell you about somebody who did this much better than I did, who was brilliant at stakeholder management. And it goes back to the 1940s and to the Ford Motor Company's V8 engine. So in the 1940s, the Ford Motor Company had decided, the management team of the company, which was very finance-driven, a bunch of professionals that had come from the much larger at the time General Motors Company, had decided to cancel the Ford V8 engine as an option on any of their cars going forward. And the V8 was their big, powerful engine, and it was part of their brand. And when this guy, Chase Morsey Jr., fresh out of the Army from World War II, took over product planning inside of Ford. As a longtime Ford buyer himself, he knew this was a mistake. He said, this is stupid, it will ruin the brand. Even though not everyone buys a V8, it's inseparable from Ford as a brand. So he went to his boss, who was the VP of product, and said, this is dumb, we can't do this. And his boss said, well, you might be right, but the executives are dead set on this, what are you going to do? Well, he set out to find the evidence that it was the wrong decision. And so he did the first market research the Ford Motor Company had ever done. He did a survey of customers and prospects, and they clearly told him that the V8 was a core part of the value proposition for the car. In fact, direct quotes were often something like, if it doesn't have a V8, I might as well buy a Chevy. He went to the dealers. They said the same thing. They all started saying, you're not really going to cancel the V8, are you? Because if you are, I think I need to change jobs. And he went to procurement and asked, he actually bought a Chevrolet, gave them the engine, the part, and asked them to take it apart and price out all the parts of the Chevy engine. And he discovered that the Chevy engine was actually more expensive to build than the V8 engine. The driving reason that they wanted to cancel it was they thought it was unprofitable and too expensive, so they didn't want to keep selling it. But then they discovered that Chevy's equivalent engine was more expensive. And he went to manufacturing and discovered that they had some new ideas about how to do assembly that would reduce the cost of assembly. And he figured out a way, with the help from finance, to model out how the V8 could be actually more profitable for them, given that they charged extra for it, than their smaller V6 engine. And more profitable than Chevrolets, too. He went to the executive team, and they were super skeptical. A meeting that was supposed to last an hour lasted all day, and they kept grilling him on his proposition that they shouldn't cancel the V8. And every time they questioned him, he said, yeah, let me get Steve here from finance. And the finance guy would stand up and say, no, he's right. And then they would question him about manufacturing, and Jane would come up and say, no, he's right. And everyone around this table supported him because they all had a piece of the plan for how to make the V8 profitable. By the end of the day, he wore them down, and they uncanceled the V8. And they, you may know that the V8 went on to be an iconic motor for Ford, that it powered the Thunderbird, and it powered the Mustang and the Falcon, and lots of iconic Ford automobiles from the 20th century. He not only saved the V8, he may possibly have saved the company from obscurity by making a good product decision, but more importantly, by making it stick through stakeholder management. I think stakeholder management is the key to success in product. It's the key to the success of your product, and it's the key for advancement of your career. It's the soft skill that makes all the hard skills work. This is my framework. I hope it's useful. I'll make the slides available. And if you're interested, I am writing a book on the topic with my co-author, Melissa Appel from Wayfair. You can join our early reader book club at productculture.org. And we're writing the book for O'Reilly right now. It'll come out later this year. But the early readers are getting access to the chapters as we write them and giving us feedback and comments. And we have a Slack group and a regular Zoom meetup. And a bunch of the, where we workshop people's stakeholder challenges. A bunch of the members have told such great stories, they've worked their way into the book as quotes. If you're a fan of the road mapping book, I'm also pleased to announce we have a road mapping online course, a masterclass. It's self-paced. It's available also at productculture.org. I'd love it if you'd all sign up. If you tweet to me about it, I can send you a discount code. And then here, if you want to go to the website, here's 2 QR codes. Pick your choice. The Aligned Book Club versus the Roadmaps Masterclass. And that's all I have for today. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to take your questions. Anybody have any questions? Actually, I believe we're going to have questions upstairs, right?
Exactly. Thank you so much, Bruce. If you want to ask any question to Bruce, just go upstairs. It's just there. For 15 minutes, you can ask any question you want about what he loves and hates. So please do it.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.